Hi, my name is Chris Lee, and for my weekly article, I'm doing it on AI. I start off with a short one. I have multiple articles here I want to discuss because this opinion is fairly short, and it talks about basically the heart of AI. And usually, when we think of AI, we think of these big computers that shoot out complex equations and complex answers based on the data we put in it. And sometimes they can be as simple as a game like here, where universal paperclips, you basically tap the screen and create paperclips manually at first, and eventually you'd create many paperclips where you can automate the system by upgrading it. And so the whole point is to keep upgrading it to make more paperclips. And as simple as this concept is, when you get to use AI in other areas, such as businesses and even healthcare, there's more weight to it and there's more consequences if things can go wrong versus just making paperclips virtually. And so they basically discuss here how a lot of companies basically use AI for their own benefits, whether it be chatbots, advertising algorithms, and cheating on homework too. And so the use of AI is really bound by not only the engineers who make it, but by the business models that use it. So whether or not these businesses want to exploit people and exploit the AI to basically tell us what's right and what's wrong, even though we don't know what kind of data is being put into it. And this can be said or summarized by one of the AIs, Sydney, saying, "Please remember that this is not the real me. This is just an experiment." And so, even though you create something like AI where it can be like a person where it responds to you, it shoots out information, it learns, at the end of the day, it's a business that ultimately controls it and controls what is being put into it, kind of like a parent to a child. And so, how does this relate to healthcare? Well, AI is currently being tested in a lot of hospitals right now, and one of the research areas that I'm doing is um, race-based algorithms in decision making. So the issue with this is that a lot of the algorithms, when inputted in the AI or in the technologies, is that they're shooting a lot of false results in that a lot of patients in these marginalized communities or certain races are not getting the treatments that they can get. And if we go down here, we can see one of the tools used to detect sepsis, so that it missed 67% of patients who developed it. Here it even says it's contributing increased discrimination against Black and Brown patients, people with disabilities, and other marginalized communities. And so oftentimes, when the AI is fed these research articles, they do see a lot of the subgroup analyses where they look at populations and they say, okay, well, is there a correlation to this and what's being studied? And oftentimes, it's pretty obvious that people in marginalized communities or people with disabilities, um, they generally are unhealthier than populations that are healthy. And so when we look at communities that don't have as many clinics next to the people, as many grocery stores with healthy foods, you start to see that a lot of it has more to do with the politics of that community rather than anything to do with the study or the medical study that started with. And this is one of the articles I'm using, and it dates back to 1840, where one of the tests for a pulmonary function test is a spirometer. And when it was invented, it's basically during a racist time. And so you look at the people who studied it, and here it says that the population divide is socioeconomic, and that race will almost entirely be eliminated. And so if we're still using data from which at a time they're racist to Black people, then how can people of that community trust using or taking a pulmonary function test without thinking in the back of their mind that maybe these test results aren't as accurate as they seem. And a lot of people don't even know this too, that a lot of the research is being used from periods of time where socially there's a lot of division and bias and racism. And so when we go to the HIT, the informatics part of it, we see here again that a lot of the preventive care and uh, care for chronic conditions aren't being given as much. And this is attributes a lot to what we feed from the data and the biases from the data. And so much like how businesses use AI or any model to sell something, it's the same for healthcare. If we look at the data, we have to see, well, who's funding it and who's researching it, because they may have a bias. They may have lived in a certain period of time where things were different. And if we go to the extent of using AI to help clinicians in their decision making and treatment planning, we have to look at everything that goes behind the decision, including the uncomfortable nature of um, how a person thinks socially about other people. And here again, empowering individuals with the technology. A lot of people don't understand the technology. And when Facebook was brought up to Congress, a lot of the congressmen and congresspeople were confused because they didn't understand the technology. And I think that's a real issue because if most people don't understand the technology, they don't understand the data that's being put into all these tests that are complicated. Because medical students, they go through 4 years of school and residency to learn all this material, whereas the average person doesn't do that, and they don't know. They just trust their doctor to make the decision for them. And so, if we're to empower the individuals, we have to make it easily accessible and explainable to people on how the decision is made from the start where it's engineered. So, what data are we putting into it? And when was it from? What kind of time period was it? How is it socially? And so, going back to the opinion of the article, I think a large part of the solution to my research in looking at AI and also looking at race based algorithms is, are we looking at all the areas that are important? And one of the most important things isn't even healthcare related, it's business related. So, who makes the final decision on what the AI is fed and what kind of bias is fed to it at the end of the day? Because in the end, it's companies trying to sell a product of AI to the healthcare companies or hospitals. And so, I think it needs to be focused and paid attention to more because it can affect communities' mortality rates and morbidity rates.